Gang! I'm still a hard man. Let's go. What's up, everyone? It has been not too long, but still a pretty good amount of time of not streaming anything, but here I am. I'm back. I'm here. Imperator Forge is here, streaming now. It is a wonderful Saturday. It is May the 19th. No, May the 18th, 2024. Good evening, Interdimensional Lizard. You showed up early. You showed up just in time. So, I'll try something a little bit different. I just need to make sure that this is not under copyright. Let me just make sure that this is not under copyright protection. I have to go look at the website. So, technically, none of this is under copyright. So, I could read this article, but the problem is this was made by someone else. So I do have to acknowledge the person who claims to have wrote this and the website that I found it. It doesn't say anything about copyright. What's up, Warriors of the Shire? So yeah, as long as it's not under copyright protection, I think it should be fine. All right, so I'm going to be reading Life in Prehistoric Times, or Daily Life in Prehistoric Times. This is not my work. This was made by Tim Lambert, Timlambrt. And this is on localhistories.org. Local Histories, Tim's History of British Towns, Cities, and so much more. It's from this website. And as you can see, there is no copyright. But regardless, Tim Lambert, the credit goes to him. This is not copyright protected, so I can read this, but I cannot make any money off of it. So I do not intend to intellectually steal from this person. It is not my intention to intellectually steal. It is not my intention to make any money out of this. So this is free. If Tim Lambert does contact me and says he would like this taken down, I will have to comply. But as far as I can tell, it is not protected by copyright law. So, Life in Prehistoric Times, the Cro-Magnon people. Modern humans appeared in Africa about roughly 100,000 years ago. By about 35,000 BP, they entered Europe. They sometimes are called Cro-Magnons. They're actually called Homo sapiens sapiens. So at the time, Europe was in the grip of one of the ice ages, one of the more recent ice ages. So the Earth has been through a lot, and I do mean a lot of ice ages and climate change. We're talking about like the Pleistocene here, a much more recent ice age. So anyways, forests only grew in the extreme south of Europe, and most of it was covered in tundra or grassland. In this harsh environment, Cro-Magnon men hunted animals such as mammoth, reindeer, red deer, bison, and wild horses. They invented the spear thrower, which allowed them to hurl spears much faster than before, than just throwing it by hand. The Cro-Magnons used bows and arrows. They started doing that with the Azulian culture, which was much, much later. They also fished using harpoons tipped with bone points. The Cro-Magnons also made pendants from animal teeth, fox, bear, and wolf, and from ivory. They also made necklaces of ivory beads and shells. They may also have painted or tattooed themselves. Polynesian people, Pacific Islanders or Polynesians, are known to tattoo themselves a lot. The Cro-Magnons buried their dead. Bodies were sometimes covered in red ochre. We don't know why, although it has been suggested that the red ochre represented the blood of the living. The Cro-Magnons were also an artistic people. They made small statuettes from ivory, bone, and stone. Some of the statuettes are pregnant women. They are sometimes called Venuses. We don't know what they were for, but they may have been fertility charms. The Cro-Magnons are most famous for their cave paintings. And my goodness, what masterful painters they were. We are not sure what the paintings were made for, but they are impressive. Colors include black, red, yellow, and white. The Cro-Magnons used charcoal, ochre, and manganese to make them. Curiously, humans were rarely painted on cave walls, but many animals were. They include horses, bison, mammoths, reindeer, bears, and rhinoceroses. In fact, a lot of people that research or go into extinct animals actually use the caves of Luscous in southern France to study what these extinct mammals actually looked like during the Ice Age. But anyways, yeah. There is nothing crude about the paintings. On the contrary, the people who made them were highly skilled. And this is supposedly what a woolly mammoth would have looked like. We don't actually have woolly mammoths anymore. They went extinct about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. So, if you want to go by creationism or the account of creation, perhaps you could say that they went extinct during Noah's flood or sometime after Noah's flood. But anyways, we don't know what the cave paintings were for, but they may have been for sympathetic magic. Primitive peoples often believed that if a model or painting was made of a person or animal and a spell was cast on it, that would somehow influence the real thing. Perhaps the cave paintings of animals were made so spells could be cast on them to make hunting them easier. In 15,000 BC, people were still living in caves, but they made much more sophisticated tools of bone and stone. They also made clothes from animal skins, and they made jewelry of animal teeth and shells. These early people hunted animals like horses, deer, and wild cattle. The end of the Ice Age. In those days, in what is now England, was covered in tundra. But by about 8,500 BC, the climate grew much warmer. Forest spread across England. At the same time, Britain was cut off from Europe. About 7,500 BC, a group of humans lived in Starkar in what is now Yorkshire, or Yorkshire. They were hunter-gatherers. They hunted deer wild cattle, pigs, and elk. They also ate birds, fish, and shellfish. By this time, humans also had domesticated dogs. They may have also made boats. Let's see here. So early farmers came to England by 4500 BC. Farming was introduced into England about 4500 BC. Actually, farming began significantly earlier in the Middle East, in what is today Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and Egypt. In Iraq, farming actually started much, much earlier. So it spread very gradually through all of Eurasia. But anyways, using stone axes, the farmers began clearing the primordial forest that covered England. They grew crops of wheat and barley, and they raised herds of cattle, pigs, and sheep. However, as well as farming, they also hunted animals such as deer, horse, and wild boar, and smaller animals such as beavers, badgers, and hares. They also gathered fruit and nuts. At the same time, the early farmers mined flint to make tools. They dug shafts, some of them 15 meters, about 50 feet deep. They used deer antlers as picks and oxen shoulder blades as shovels. They also made pottery vessels, but they still wore clothes made from animal skins. They erected simple wooden huts to live in. Moreover, the early farmers made elaborate tombs for their dead or for the ancestors. They dug burial chambers and then lined them with wood or stone. Over them, they created mounds of earth called barrows or barrows. From about approximately 2500 BC, the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, farmers made circular monuments called hinges. Now, the first hinges actually only appeared in North Africa, and then a little bit later they appeared in Sardinia and some of the isles of the Mediterranean. But not long thereafter, by about maybe 3000 BC, they started to make giant stone monuments and hinges in Ireland, Britain, and France, and Spain, and just all over what would eventually become the Celtic world by the Iron Age. So we have impressive monuments such as Stonehenge and just all sorts of interesting monuments. The problem is nobody really knows why they were made. They were made so long ago in such a remote age that there is no writing. These people did not write. They did not leave any written language, and so it's very speculative why they built these things, why they were left. Let's see here. Let's see here. By 2000, called hinges. At first, they were, so about 2500 BC, the Neolithic New Stone Age farmers made circular monuments called hinges. There is one famous one at Newgrange in Ireland, and then of course there's Stonehenge in West England. At first, they were simple ditches with stones or wooden poles erected in them. The most famous hinge is, of course, Stonehenge. Now, later in the Middle Ages, people claimed that the wizard Merlin was in fact the one who built Stonehenge. That Stonehenge was built by the wizard Merlin. Geoffrey of Monmouth, a Welsh chronicler that wrote a lot about the Holy Grail and about King Arthur, claimed that Stonehenge had been built by Merlin the wizard of Arthurian lore. There was also claims that giants had built Stonehenge, but instead it was people in the Neolithic that built it. So, but interesting medieval lore. And then later people claimed that Druids had built Stonehenge. It began as a simple ditch with an internal bank of earth. Outside the entrance stood the heel stone. The famous circles of stones were erected hundreds of years later. Stonehenge was altered and added over 1,000 years from 2250 BC to 1250 BC before it was finally finished in its present state. After 2500 BC, a new culture had spread across what is now England. The inhabitants are known as the Beaker people because of the pottery beakers they made. They were bell-shaped and were often decorated with bone or cords. However, it is not known if the Beaker people were a new race who migrated to England from Europe, or if the people of England simply adopted a new culture from the continent. At any rate, by 2000 BC, English society was changed by the invention of bronze. And bronze began around the Middle East. We don't know exactly where, but the invention of the wheel, the potter's wheel, and bronze, or actually first copper and then bronze, began in the Middle East around Egypt and Syria and Iraq and Canaan about 3000 BC and was finished there by 1200 or 1500 BC. But in England, bronze came much later, only around 2000 BC did it actually arrive in England. Bronze provided more efficient tools and weapons, especially weapons for war. The Bronze Age people also rode horses, and they were the first people in England to weave cloth and wool. Bronze Age people held their hair with bone pins, and they wore crescent-shaped necklaces. In the late Bronze Age, 1000 to 650 BC, forts were built on hills, so warfare, it seemed, was becoming much more common. This may have been because the population was rising, that is, it was growing in numbers, and fertile land was becoming harder to obtain. Meanwhile, the Bronze Age people continued to build barrows, although cremation was practiced. The dead were buried with useful artifacts. Presumably, the living believed the dead would need these in the afterlife. Unfortunately, since they had no written records, nothing is known about the Bronze Age religion. We know that Bronze Age people lived in round wooden huts with thatched roofs, but nothing is known about their society or how it was organized. However, there were almost certainly different classes by the time. Tin and copper was exported from Britain along with animal hides. Jet and amber were imported in for the rich, which is only for the wealthy, the warrior elites, or the chieftain elites. Let's see here. I think this is the same article. Okay, I don't think that's. I'm going to find what I want. Let's see here. I already read that. See if I could do this. I can read free articles on this site too. All right. This is also not copyright protected. At least I don't think it is. But I can use this. All right. So this is ancient primitive society, ancient man. About 15,000 years ago, the climate of the planet began to change. Water generated by melting glaciers brought life back to the planet. One of the most suitable for living is the territory in the Middle East, from Israel to Iraq. Many flowering trees grew on the hills. The weather continued to improve. Edible plants grew in rare forest. On plateaus and plains, animals bred. The area was a real paradise for hunter-gatherers. It was in this area that people found what changed the history of mankind. People discovered medicinal herbs and grain. This has become a spark for the development of mankind. In the era of primitive society, many significant events happened. The first of these was the emergence of a cognizant or sane person, the creation of the ability to use the mind to think beyond mere material needs, make means of labor and use them. Then the gathering passed to the production industry, which is production of crafts. This process has acquired the right of the farming revolution. Then about 10 to 12,000 years ago, a person began to change nature, and these changes have been taking place to this day. The appearance of fire in human life made significant changes for how human clans were organized. Now, activity was not just limited to daylight hours. They began to cook food on fire, and this improved nutrition because of the greater amount of protein consumed. The bright light of fire and the smoke emanating from it would scare off animals and competing predators, which increased human security. Humans are the only animals that can use fire, and therefore they have a natural advantage over any other type of competitor in the wild, as no other animal can make fire or utilize fire. The most important thing was the appearance of cognitive fixed pattern speech, the rise of the ability for humans to communicate. This allowed them to talk more coherently about their thoughts. Following this, religion and art arose. Then comes the birth of the division of society. States appear. There are various systems for the periodization of ancient society. However, they are all imperfect. One is the Paleolithic, which is 2.4 million to 10,000 BC. In its turn, it is divided early, middle, late period. In this period, hunters and gatherers lived. The first means of labor from the flint appeared. Number 2 is the Mesolithic, 10,000 to 5,000 before the beginning of our era. People created bone and stone tools, and in addition used spears and bows and arrows during hunting. Number 3, the Neolithic, 5,000 to 2,000 before the beginning of our era. The beginning of time is connected with the Neolithic Revolution. Ceramics and new ways of farming appear. Number 4, Copper Age, is 5,000 to 3,500 BC. It is just actually a earlier phase of the same Bronze Age. a transitional stage from the Stone to the Bronze Age. During this period, along with stone, copper was common. Copper production was common. Number 5 was the Bronze Age, 3500 to 800 BC. The leading role is played by bronze production. And finally, number 6 is the Iron Age, about 800 years before the beginning of the birth of Christ. Everywhere they began to produce iron production. Researchers believe that during the time of the Paleolithic and subsequently the Neolithic, the situation in society for men and women was equal. Therefore, gender equality existed. Later, the emergence of a paired family, monogamy, occurs. Then, that of the matriarchal family. The appearance of the spiritual side of culture is attributed to the Paleolithic era. The oldest evidence of this is the burial of dead people. There are also finds of human visual activities. A primitive society is characterized by a rather slow pace of change. An essential feature of this time is a close connection with the material side of life. People's speech is connected with specific things and events, typically tied with the environment and with the hunting. The connection of people with nature, or the connection of people to nature, was very strong. Consciousness and human activity is connected with everything that was seen around them. Writing had not yet been invented. As a result, information accumulated very slowly. Social and cultural change was quite inhibited. During its inception, a person was guided merely by instincts and was not much different from an animal, other than the fact that human beings could harness and utilize tools for a means to an end. Over time, consciousness grew. Instincts gradually turned into social or societal norms. This is the beginning of culture. Social norms or general rules or taboos governing the behavior of people in society. Varieties of social norms in ancient society are customs, moral standards, norms of religion. Customs, the rules of behavior that have developed with repeated repetition and are in the habit. Moral norms, rules of conduct based upon the primitive notion of good and evil. Religious norms based on religious beliefs. Art was created much earlier than writing. In the late Paleolithic, people knocked out abstract on the rock signs. On the walls of the caves depicted animals in human bands. In addition, already during this period, sculptures were created using stones and bones. It is believed that in addition to the sculptures that have come to us in cave paintings, art also seemed like music and songs in ceremonies. Dancing also happened. People painted trees on the ground and bark. Animal skins were used, including for creativity. Women made jewelry from natural materials, dyeing them with colored pigments. The desire to decorate your cave or your home and the body testifies to the emergence of the ability of abstract thinking. In the Paleolithic, artists portrayed mostly herbivores, much more rarely predatory animals that pose a danger to people, was done. People worked on animal tusks. In the Neolithic period, stone buildings appeared. At the same time, images began to betray not only specific but also abstract concepts. Many types of decorative and applied art have appeared. The power was based mainly on social norms and was supported by the authority of the leaders and elders. Norms regulated all spheres of life. Submission for people was not surprising. The interests of the Guinness were above all. Accordingly, the violation of the rules led to severe punishment. The most important authority is the collection of the clan, or the collected, accumulated customs and knowledge of the clan or society. At the meeting, all matters were decided, including the choice of an elder and commander. In most cases, these positions were held by men. At the heart of everything was the principle of kinship. A characteristic feature of power is its social character. In the conditions of farming of that time, the property was joint and distributed among all members of society. The size of the share depended on the amount of work done. After a person began to work consciously, began to keep records of products. For this, special members of the community even stood out. Such actions increased the chances of survival and maintaining order. Accounting involved keeping records. Since people still did not know how to write, instead they used nicks and notches. Primitive art spanned all continents except Antarctica, but the largest number of finds of ancient painting was found in Europe. The reasons for the appearance of creativity were craving for the beautiful, first beliefs, faith in folk remedies, folk tales, magic, magical charms. The following development of family relationships happened in this order. Family formation can be divided into three periods. First, the ancient herd. 2, matriarchy. 3, patriarchy, divided into 2 stages: paternal gender, neighboring community, stage of collapse of the primitive system, and the beginning of the first civilizations, or the beginning of the first actual organized states. So, number 1, we have the primitive herd, the conditional name of the fickle human community, surviving alone in harsh wildlife, which was very difficult and almost impossible. Hunting, collecting food, and fighting off wild animals was much easier together. For this reason, people united in groups or in bands, and this became the first public form of uniting people. From the animal herd, the community was distinguished by the fact that members of the herd helped each other, built dwellings, raised children together, shared life experiences. Life in the team prompted people to start talking, to communicate, to pass on knowledge through shared experience. Hunting contributed to the improvement of tools, and this in turn is the development of man and coherent society. So this is probably from the beginning of when fire was invented, from the beginning of the creation of fire, and this lasted until about the late Paleolithic or the middle of the Mesolithic. The second phase is the matriarchy, a stage characterized by a dominant position in the society with women. Property was inherited only on the maternal side. The marriage was a formal or uniformal group, and then later a pair marriage. But with the separation of husband and wife. In the late stages, they lived together. Only the husband went to live in the wife's community. So when a man and a woman formerly were married, it was the man who went and lived in the woman's community. In history, this phenomenon is called matriarchy. This is the first form of cohabitation of the pair. The third phase was patriarchy. Also, this matriarchal phase lasted from about the Ice Age or late in the Paleolithic, maybe early in the Mesolithic, to roughly about the beginning of civilization, sometimes even after the rise of the first civilizations, but not after the end of the Copper Age. So the end of the Copper Age. Finally, the patriarchy became a more dominant feature in society when men became more stratified and it was only men who held positions of authority. This period was the last in the primitive system. It was characterized by the leading role of men in all areas of the community. Accordingly, a woman after marriage moved to her husband's community. So when a woman was married to a man, she would go and live in his community. At the late stage of the patriarchy, a monogamous family appeared. One husband and one wife, and maybe concubines. Primitive society covers the era from the emergence of man to the formation of the state. The main features of a primitive society were low level of production development, collective work effort, common tools and means of labor, equal distribution of products, a great dependence on man on nature. Over time, the prerequisites for the collapse of primitive society and the formation of the state appeared. The formation of the state caused three main reasons, or were caused by this: public division of labor, the appearance of private property, class division within society. After primitive society passed to slavery, a change in the type of power distribution occurred. We can draw a general conclusion about the fact that the production economy led to labor separation or specialization and inequality in society, as well as class differentiation. All these events led to the transition from a primitive to a slave society. The decomposition of the primitive system, the decomposition of the slave system for the first millennium led to the formation of a feudal society. Each individual state had its own distinctive features and specifics of formation. Religion had a significant impact on the education of the state. In primitive society, every single clan worshipped its god. When the clan united, it was this circumstance that strengthened the power of the ruling elite. The power was still possessed. The power of the kings or the priests was still associated with the gods, but the term of the reign of the king was extended and gradually became a term for life. As a result, from elected power, the hereditary principle of monarchy became hereditary, transferred from father to son. The reasons for the formation of the state were science, the influence of religion, and the strengthening of state power. And so this encompasses a very huge section of the existence of man. The prehistoric world, the prehistoric period. The history of mankind is more than 1 million years. All we know about this period is the result of an analysis of the facts obtained through archaeology or anthropology. Scientists are trying to explore the beginning of human society because it was then that key development vectors were set. This article describes a person's life in the prehistoric era, describes the main achievements in the specific stages of ancient history. Cognitive and linguistic revolution. A person's speech is unique. We can talk about what is not. what once happened, or what can only be in terms of our subjective assumptions. Animals also have very limited communication skills, but they can only characterize what is happening at a given point in time. It is at the beginning of human existence, in the process of the appearance of Homo sapiens, abstract thinking began to appear. The cognitive revolution made it possible to create a cultural foundation for the existence of large groups that later became the main players in the historical arena: tribes, peoples, and states. When the first states began to appear in the Copper Stone Age, its inhabitants realized their involvement in it. Imagine society and the state itself. But 10% of the population of their country did not know. Language, common myths, beliefs, historical memory, their occurrence with the liturgic revolution. By the way, money is also the result of language transformations or language transactions. For them to appear, you need faith that a small piece of paper is of value and a currency that is recognized by everyone. Ancient forms of religion. Thanks to the cognitive or the brain revolution, humanity has created such a cultural phenomenon as religion. The abstract thinking that appeared began to help a person understand and explain the phenomena that was around him. So there were deities and objects for fear and or for worship. The first forms of religion were: number one, magic, the belief that a person with his set of concrete actions can affect the future, to cause rain or take successful actions on the hunt. People performed ritual dances or painted special drawings on the walls of caves. By the way, the first forms of art also appeared, probably in connection to this. Number two, animism, faith in the existence of spirits. Number three, totemism or totemism, faith in that then family or tribe comes from a faith or belief that the power or the influence of a family or tribe comes from a particular animal spirit. It is the patron of the animal or the animal of the tribe, which means that it must be protected and venerated and worshipped. Number four, fetishism, belief in the sacred power of individual objects. Ancient people often made amulets and other talismans. As you can see, many of the elements of primitive religions have been pumped into modern monotheistic religions, or even into the daily life of society. For example, Hindus honor cows, Egyptians honor cats. Discoveries and achievements made in this period. The prehistoric period is often called the Stone Age. The main material was wood. In fact, for a very long time before humans even used stone tools, they used tools made of wood or bone, and then later only then of stone and obsidian, flint and obsidian. But archaeologists find stones, therefore, in honor of this material and named it after this era. The Stone Age is initially divided into three stages: Paleolithic, Ancient Stone Age, Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age, and Neolithic, New Stone Age. The Paleolithic happened approximately 2.5 million years ago to 14 to 10,000 years ago. Most of the northern hemisphere was covered with glaciers, the time of the existence of mammoths. Homo sapiens continued its movement to the north and west of the Eurasian continent. People often wandered, lived in clan communities, hunted collectively. A small temporary hut created by the bones of mammoth and shikura served as housing. Such housing was quickly disassembled and transferred to another place of residence. so migratory movement. The Mesolithic period was approximately 15,000 years ago. During this period happened first global warming, the Younger Dryas. As a result of the Younger Dryas, the glaciers melted, the mammoths went north, and the number of rivers increased. It was in the Mesolithic that a person invented the first transport, the boat, and the first shooter weapon appeared, bows and arrows. The thing is that the mammoths were replaced by faster animals, for which the person no longer could keep up with. So once again, man had to be inventive and create better tools for his survival. Finally, the Neolithic, which is generally 10 to 3,000 years ago. During this period, the second largest in its consequence occurred the Agrarian Revolution. Here it is called the Neolithic. Humanity has learned to cultivate the earth and tamed animals, so agriculture and animal breeding appeared. With them, the prerequisites for a sedentary lifestyle, which means building cities and creating and developing urban infrastructure. They also invented the Neolithic ceramic dishes. Humanity has existed for more than 1,000,000 years, of which the Stone Age is about 90% of that history. Our era, a little over 2,000 years, these are only 2 incomplete percent of the whole story. The entire story of civilization is merely 2% of the history of the existence of the species. It turns out that the longest period of history remains the most mysterious for us. Yes, events developed very slowly, but it was then that the foundations of human existence were laid. Abstract thinking, faith, a settled lifestyle, the desire to be independent of nature. So, quite important breakthroughs. All right, so that's it. That was my reading through of the daily life of prehistoric times. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Interdimensional Lizard, good evening. Warriors of the Shire says, hard man. Ghost of Nicolos says, forge. Finding Freedom says, forge, gang. Finding Freedom says, Romans 1:25, to Fani the cat. Romans 1:25, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. There's actually mention of talismans and the worship of idols, Asherah poles and stuff like that in the Book of the Kings, and also in the Book of Judges, or in the Book of the Kings in Isaiah, for example. There's a lot of it in Isaiah and Jeremiah. Interdimensional Lizard, the writer acknowledges the Bronze Age, but not the age of Sargon. Sargon of Akkad is going to be in a later period. This is not the ancient Near East. This is the prehistoric period that I'm specifically talking about. Krail says, sup, what's up? 07. We really needed each other. I mean, we still do, but the bankers and the military apparatus and the secularization and greater materialization with mass consumerism destroys people's inherent need for each other. Instead, people go to Blu-rays, to DVDs, to video games, and the internet, instead of going to each other and trying to provide and help each other and to love each other. Interdimensional Lizard, we need a line of history audiobooks narrated by Imperator of Forge. Well, consider this one the first. So, I'm This has been Daily Life in Prehistory. This has been my reading through that. And this is going to be the first of many read-throughs that I will do of many different periods, many different eras. So this was the prehistoric one. Next time I will do ancient Egypt. I'll see you then. Peace.